This is part of the Connected TV World Summit virtual content series, and I'm John Moulding, Editor-in-Chief at Videonet, and I'm now joined by Michelle Munson, who's the CEO and founder of Eluvio, and she's going to talk about the future of streaming. So, hello, Michelle.
Good morning, John. Good afternoon in the UK.
Thank you. So in a moment, we're going to talk about content delivery. Before we do that, can we look at the streaming market more broadly and the developments that you think could have a major impact on streaming video, how we can stream more and better video?
Certainly. Well, I think perhaps due to the world crisis right now, we see the growing demand, if you will, for streaming at mass scale, and also the importance of the internet, not just to entertainment, but also to communication in general. And I think that the time that we're living in, especially right now, not only brought that to the forefront, but it's also going to really, if you will, distinguish and separate the technologies that are able to reach audiences at scale. And one of the, I think, positive sides of real, tragedies like we're dealing with right now is that it does create a discontinuity in usage patterns and economics, such that we can have some emergent new ways of doing things. And I do expect that as this time that we're in right now passes, that we may see some pretty significant transitions in the industry to, first of all, further growth of streaming services, and then also along with that, a really focused look at better and more efficient ways of doing that at scale.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, when we all emerge from this, which could be in quite a few months, I mean, what do you think will be the biggest talking points if, say, IBC or m-ABR go ahead? When people come to your stand, what do you expect them to be asking you about?
Well, toward the points of efficiency and thinking differently, probably now and into the next 6 months as we come out of this. But I think the most important points for folks in the industry will be how can we reach audiences with maximum quality, and also do that with really greatest value accruing back to the content. Certainly, everybody will be very cost conscious, and I think in addition to that, the need to be very agile in the supply chain will be a really important point, and approaches that really simplify and allow for scale will be important. In our case, obviously, one of the most important points of what we're trying to do with the content fabric is dramatically simplify what has been video at scale, and also to really bring the value control back to content itself, as opposed to really having it distributed over internet infrastructure providers, and also really eaten up with a set of different services that take cost.
Okay, well, let's talk about the delivery architecture then, because you have a solution called the Eluvio Content Fabric, and on the face of it, that looks quite revolutionary. I mean, just tell us about it, first of all. What is so different about it?
Well, there are a few things that are really fundamentally different. It is a new substrate, as we often think of clouds, but it is very different than in architecture and in approach than what are today's clouds and CDNs. First of all, the Content Fabric's approach allows for content to be served directly from source. And what I mean by that is that it has a novel, decentralized, distributed, and dynamic architecture that really makes it possible to go from source files and source streams to consumable output directly in place in the fabric. And then that eliminates the need for many separate services, eliminates the need for traditional CDN, but also moving upstream, traditional transcoding and microservices and cloud stacks, databases, et cetera. And one of the most important, I think, reasons why it's possible to be adopted is the quality of the video is quite high, meaning that the picture quality is maximum, and then also the video quality is very low latency and consistent. We are finding, as it's been adopted in film especially, that it enables large libraries to reach consumer and business audiences at extremely low cost with high quality. And then also now we're getting into live streaming with broadcast, which is really projects that are enabling next generation over-the-top linear channels that combine together one or more live streams that can be scheduled and also allow for that kind of composition and serving just in time from source.
Okay, and I think the key in terms of the sort of base technology is that you take a mezzanine file, you ingest it, and then decompose that into base elements, which could be sort of data, media data, metadata, code that you would use to kind of recreate the streams. That goes into the fabric, and then at the edge, that is kind of reconstructed from those base elements into a video stream. So there's no video streams kind of moving across the actual content delivery architecture. Is that right?
Yes, but also in that process, there are also no file copies. And the architecture eliminates throughout all of the file I/O, which is one of the major culprits of the latency that we see throughout both VOD and live-based workflows. In addition, that architecture that you described is also inherently dynamic, and it's dynamic in a very predictable way, meaning that the content itself has both metadata as well as binary media and code that's part of each content object, and those work together to allow for creating personalized output at scale. And then finally, one of the most unique properties of this that's becoming very important to our customers is the fact there's a contract identity that's part of every content asset in the fabric, and that contract allows for transactions, literally rights in place on the content itself, which means that you can directly control availability. You also have intrinsic access control, so content can be reused between consumer and B2B properties. And then finally, it also allows for new kinds of monetization that we really couldn't do before. So a combination of personalized content with rights in place.
Okay, and that's using blockchain, is that right?
The software contracts that are a part of each object are a blockchain contract, and then the foundations of the fabric, as opposed to a classical database-driven distributed system, is a decentralized protocol, effectively a blockchain protocol. So the fabric nodes carry that out as part of their operation.
Okay, well, I know one of the early users was MGM Studios, and Jim Crosby, their SVP of Digital, said this enables us to transact business directly at the content. Now, what does that mean exactly if you enable content?
Yeah. Great question. So MGM's use of the fabric grew a lot over the last 6 months, and actually MGM.com, a new corporate website just launched, and quite a few folks in the industry have commented on it to me. It really proves out the point. It's built, of course, directly on the content fabric. The main point and the way MGM has exploited this, and also, in general, how customers exploit this, is that contract that's part of the asset provides for universal access control on the object. And in their case, their top-shelf library, which consists of many hundreds of films and also many thousand TV programs, those are used in multiple environments. First of all, in a public environment on MGM.com, and then also in B2B environments, such as a screening and licensing portal, a new servicing portal that's upcoming. And in those cases, that contract provides a flexible access control layer that allows for public access in the case of the website, and in really tightly controlled access for full-length titles, including enforcing watermarking requirements per individual in the case of the B2B sites. And this kind of model also allows for doing personalization as well, or ties into it. For example, when licensees are browsing content, they have the option to create personalized lists. The data in those lists ends up getting stored back against a wallet contract that's really representing that user's data. So this theme then circulates throughout the fabric and is really proving to be pretty powerful.
Okay, and just in terms of the actual architecture, it's still standard in the sense that the output is a standard ABR stream. So whatever you do inside the cloud, or the architecture. It's just going to clients in the same way as before.
That's right. So the input and the output. So the Fabric is literally a platform as a service network that we run and operate, and the inputs and the outputs to the Fabric are standard, and that's really due to how we implemented the software. On the output side, all of the output is standard adaptive bitrate streaming for Dash and HLS, as well as standard DRM, such as wideband DRM, HLS, AES, etc. And that's also nicely extensible to not only H.264 encoding, but other encoding, including HDR, which we're bringing in right now. And then on the source side, we take in standard files. They can be flat files in any master format, IMF packages, as well as streams. And on the streaming side, I want to talk to that a little bit, John. We are involved in some pretty interesting projects right now around live streaming for the purpose of next generation linear channels. And those live streams come in a variety of forms these days. They can be very, I would say, web-oriented and HTTP packaged, or they can be more traditional MES quality broadcast streams directly from encoders. Those would be MPEG transport stream, and they can be very high bit rate direct to the Fabric. And one of the really important points is there really has not been a satisfactory solution through cloud-based architectures for doing next-generation linear, not with frame-accurate video, not with the kind of cost metrics that broadcasters need, and certainly not with the latency targets they're trying to obtain. So we think this is a really important time. And getting back to your original question, with audiences really being focused on streaming and streaming quality, especially at the these few months where the world is really paused, right? I think that the difference between architectures that can really do a high quality, consistent job with low latency will be more and more evident as we go through the next few months.
And how long do you think it will be then before we could start to treat linear channels as streaming video to set-top boxes on a grand scale? I mean, obviously broadcast isn't going away yet, but satellite's highly efficient. Do you think we're getting remotely close to that tipping point where it becomes viable?
I do, and you can see it in my eagerness to answer your question. I think that, first of all, what we're seeing in our customers is a really strong appetite to push forward on proving out next-generation solutions, which are largely over-the-top or purely over-the-top, meaning over the Internet. And there are many reasons for that. The first, of course, is the agility and the audience reach. The second also is flexibility. So take, for example, the problem of a broadcaster who really wants to bring together both national programming and local owned and operated station programming. In the traditional sense, this is very difficult to do with agility. And then also it's difficult to do the way that rights are currently enforced. They're typically done on the receiver side as opposed to intrinsic into the channel. And then finally it's costly because every single one of the O&O stations has to basically take care of themselves in terms of providing sources. And then finally the opportunity to monetize, to really make sure that available advertising spots are not only fully utilized, but are really utilized to maximize the gain both to the advertiser and also to the stations is really challenging with traditional architectures. They're very dumb in a quote-unquote computer science sense. And what we see is, to get back to your question, is a huge driving appetite to break out of this and be able to do it with software over the top. The problem with what we have been dealing with traditional cloud stacks is they have very mediocre performance. And by mediocre, I mean both latencies as well as a challenge to put the pieces together. And then finally, they can also be very costly.
So do you think we could reach the point where addressable advertising could be achieved as a kind of an IP process, so IP into IP video, and we can actually avoid having to get national broadcasters or free-to-air terrestrial broadcasters to insert into broadcast streams? Could we get to sort of streaming at scale fast enough to stop them having to do that?
Yes, Absolutely. And I think the first technology that's necessary is frame-accurate insertion that is part of the channel origination, the channel source. I don't know if origination is the right term, but at the upstream, right, at the source. And one of the most important parts of the video stack in our fabric is the focus on that. That is to have dynamic content that is frame-accurate. And once that's possible, and very controllable in code, right? Then you have the opportunity to combine that together with either traditionally placed insertion points or even machine learned insertion points. And then the content really starts to become quite smart. And then finally, the ad content itself. Today, it's of course served by ad services, and there are a few standard ones that are very large scale. They can continue to be sources of ads, but I would note that there is appetite to also look at serving ad content directly, where the ad content itself can be content that's directly in the fabric. And what the outcome of this is a really highly personalized, frame-accurate, scalable model that no longer requires we do anything special on a client, or that we wait for third-party insertions that may not be really high quality. And it also gives control over, if you will, the ad buy, but also even more modern architectures. The way this kind of system works, it allows for data flow to be very accurate, meaning you know exactly what an audience has watched because it's provable, but at the same time you also have secure protection on the data flow between the viewer and the advertiser. And this, as we know, is a very important point to privacy. So my underlying emphasis here is that we have the technology and also the means for the first time to do a really good job at this. It's very profitable, but also privacy protecting.
Okay, and machine learning in general, it's one of these sort of industry 4.0 kind of processes that could impact every part of the media industry. But in terms of content delivery, what impact could machine learning have?
In our case, I mean, we use machine learning in many ways. The most obvious outside manifestation is video understanding. So we've built several video understanding models directly into the fabric, which allow for discovery of what's in the content, people, significant objects, places, significant activities. Right now we're working on some actual semantic understanding in that. And that's important because it allows the content metadata to be rich and then used with personalization. And a good example of that is a clipping service, for example, in a film library, where the clips that are offered are literally self or automatically made based on points of interest, for example. And then also what's selected can be fed back and then learned from to make better recommendations. In sports, another great example of this is really automated opportunities or automation of finding opportunities for sponsorship, which is based on who or what happened in a particular event. That sort of outside view on video understanding is one piece. We also happen to use machine learning internally in our network and its operation, and there are many things you can do with that. A couple that are quite different than how we've thought about network design in the past is it's possible to choose optimal paths for clients and also overlay routing. And of course, the Content Fabric is an overlay platform. It's also possible to use this to be smart about knowing what content is most popular. And of course, all resources are limited in any system, and that allows for making smart decisions, for example, about what stays in caches on the nodes, for example.
Okay, and just to finish up, what impact do you think 5G will have on streaming? Is it a game changer in terms of demand? Are we going to see people consuming far more on their mobile devices?
Yeah, I think it's more incremental than it's often talked about, but it's fantastic in terms of bringing more audience bandwidth. And certainly, from our point of view, it really enables what we would think of as the denser, more populated areas to have ever more bandwidth for consumption at a
and linear
cost, and all of that is extremely helpful to the whole proposition that we've been discussing here. There aren't actually any uniquenesses in terms of IP access that 5G brings, but it has promoted the idea that we can have dense pockets of coverage. In our case, again, some of our broadcast customers have partnerships with 5G networks, and one of the uses of the content fabric is to provide a really strong way of getting value to the content provider out of using the 5G network. There are also nice things about the edge topology of 5G networks, where some of the same companies that are telcos that are offering, or wireless carriers that are offering 5G, also have what they would call edge compute, and that works really well for something like the content fabric to have additional nodes.
Okay, well, let's hope that we can all meet up again before too long to discuss all these lovely technologies in more detail. And thank you very much for giving us your time, Michelle. It's great talking to you. And
you bet.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you today. Thanks. Bye-bye.